Yeah, that's also a very tricky thing as far as
Exactly.
dissecting the Bible, because
So,
there are some things that are hyperbole that we have
mhm.
taken as gospel truth instead of saying, hey, this was just an exaggerated way of saying this, or this was poetry, or this, like, yeah, getting into scripture and like understanding context and
Oh,
also
so let me
understanding.
ask you a question. So are y'all saying it's okay to cheat on your spouse?
No, I'm not saying that.
Okay, that's all I wanted to say.
Wait, you didn't ask me.
I said y'all. Did y'all say y'all means you all?
I didn't write the Bible. But if I go by the tenets of certain parts of the Bible, it would be considered okay because it was only changed when you had concubines and they were pretty much accessible to the finances because most people that are in power, they also were in power of church. If you look at
From
the Catholics, that's why you see the Catholic priests are not allowed to have wives because they also had wives and concubines. That's documented. I'm a big student of John Henrik Clark, Doctor
it was something
John
that
Henrik
I
Clark.
had saw that kind of explained this. So it from what I had saw that was talking about this topic was that it was never in God's divine plan for, like what you're saying, concubines and having, polygamy and things like that. But it did happen. If you look at the start, I'm just repeating what I learned.
No judgment.
You look at the start of creation, it was the start of one man, one woman. And then, of course, sin, you know, came, and then we get into that process. But they said that if you look at all of the situations that were brought forth in terms of those people who were in, had multiple wives, if you look at their lives, you can look at the outcome of what happened in their lives and the outcome and the things that occurred in their lives of those who were in those relationships. The outcome was not good.
Okay,
um
mistaken. So
so
their outcomes were basically because they shied from the favor of the Lord, not because of who they betted.
but that's out of the favor of the Lord, though. If that was not his divine plan, if that was not his divine plan, and his plan was to be with one woman and one man, and you operated outside of that plan, you're inviting stuff into your life that is not necessarily going to yield positive fruit because you're not planted in the right soil, so to speak.
Okay, so if you're asking me, I believe you should cleave to one woman. If I was born in Nigeria and I was following their tenets, those are men that advance the village and have one, two, three wives. If I'm on the other side of the world, how do I tell them they're wrong because they follow
But that's just
Islam?
us saying,
If
you're
I'm in,
talking culturally as opposed
okay,
to
so
religiously. So those, yeah.
I'm just making it clear. I grew up in a Christian household, Bible thumper, island boy. You went to church three times a week. Sunday was super long.
Sound like us.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
So, but we
So
touch these. I try to stay away from them because I use the words of Professor, rest in peace, John Henrik Clark, who was a professor emeritus who studied religion back and forth. And I also did the work as for studying. I believe there's something in it. I believe if you leave people with ego and narcissists to tell our tales, you should have questions. And most of us conform to what we believe in because we don't want to disappoint the people we love.
yeah,
They're
I
still in
think
West. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, well, I think that when we get on the subject of multiple women, multiple men, right? I think that
Multiple men. Oh my gosh.
I mean, listen, there's multiple men in the Bible too.
Yeah, I
But
know. Yeah. I'm just trying to
so
remember that.
but
You're right.
here's the thing. I think that
Mm.
the a lot of the leaders of the Bible encourage one to one, right? Because it says in the beginning was Adam and Eve, right? So they always push towards, the one to one, right? What is interesting, even when we talk about like people like Solomon and all his infinite wisdom, right? God had no problem with him marrying other women. The problem came when he started marrying quote unquote strange women, right? And that also helps point to how powerful women's influence can be because he had already had a whole bunch of women prior to marrying those strange women. But God was like, hey, don't marry these women. And a lot of times when the guys married multiple women, right? Especially when you talk about like Israel, right? When he only married the first woman because the father decided like, yo, you can't get the one you want until you get the one you don't want because I'm not trying to have two daughters and try to like take care of one of them. I want you to take care of both my daughters. And then he eventually getting the other one. And it created a whole bunch of issues what Mistaken is talking about, that the one that he didn't want had majority of the children. The one that Israel did want had very few children, and he favored those children so strongly because it came from the woman that he wanted versus I think her name was Leah or something like that, which he didn't want to have children with this woman or didn't want to be with this woman, but he had majority of his kids from this woman. And there's been a lot of beef between having multiple women's in the word and stuff like that. So I think there's credence to what Mistakens talk about, but there is some level of gray to some degree when it comes to multiple wives and stuff like that.
When we
Very,
speak,
very small
when we
gray.
speak of King Solomon, he got old. His wives turned him to believe in other gods, and he fell out of favor of the Lord. That's how he went awry.
Well, I have a
Those same
question
women that
though.
you.
Just because the Bible describes what happened, does it necessarily mean it was prescribed? Like, so what I mean is that the Bible often talks about things that occurred in that time. Like,
Mhm.
keeping it real, that was the culture of that time, right? But even though that was something that occurred, it doesn't necessarily mean like it is describing things that happen without necessarily saying that it was God's ideal plan. I guess that's what I was getting at. So if we
I
could say
get
that
you.
it's wrong or whatever,
I never
I
said it
think
was. I
what
never
most
got to a
people is
conclusion. But
got
you
it.
got to run your own race because at the end of the day, nobody can tell you that you're gonna burn in damnation for not seeing life the way they see
Mm.
life. Because that's why I gave you different dynamics. If you grew up in Asia, maybe you're following Confucianism. If you grew up in Sudan, maybe you're Muslim. If you grow up in Spain, you're Catholic. If you grew up down south, them good old boys, maybe a Protestant evangelist. At the end of the day, I'm just saying you have to run your own race, and this is something that usually you hear utensils drop when you start talking about this in people's houses because they're so ingrained in, okay, this is the tenet of how I live, and if anything out of what I believe, you're a pagan, or you worship pagan people. It's just to have open conversation because I don't see you as evil. I
Mm.
might not see life the same way as you do. It's just how I treat you, how I go about having conversation with you as we talk about politics and every other thing that actually sets a precedent for how we live day to day and how we look at people. I think the basic minimums is you should be able to push out in this world what you wish to reciprocate back.